So you're all probably wondering about the effects of the environment of the BP oil spill. But before we talk about the effects on the environment, short and long term, let's talk about how they cleaned it up. So, the first thing they did was they used containment booms. A containment boom is a temporary floating barrier used to contain an oil spill. Booms are used to collect oil in concentrated areas, while skimmers separate the crude oil from the water. Also, they used capping. Capping requires a wellhead, and is a generic term used to describe the component at the surface of an oil or gas well that provides the structural and pressure containing interface for the drilling and production equipment, meaning that they were putting the cover on top of where the oil was leaking. Also, they used underwater dispersants, also known as controlled burns. This gets rid of large portions of the oil during the spill. Controlled burns operations had to be postponed though, because the oil went into the water and made this technique very dangerous. Also, they used absorbent materials. This required a lot of materials like wood shavings or human hair to be put on top of oil to try to collect it. This was one of the most natural ways and very effective in the ultimate cleanup. The final and one of the hardest ways to do it was manual cleanup. This was used in the beginning of the spill. It is also used in nearly almost all oil spills. The method of manual cleanup requires down and dirty techniques employed when oil spills get particularly messy. Manual cleanup consists of placing workers on the coast armed with shovels, rakes, and gloves to collect oil that is run ashore. Manual cleanup requires heavy machinery and is used in areas that are plagued by heavy oil beaches or areas that are thick in debris. So, now that we're done with the ways they cleaned up the oil spill, let's talk about the effects on the environment. So first, a vital part of the seafood industry was the oysters, shrimp, and the crab. Oil and hydrocarbons are toxic to oysters and will remain a problem as the hydrocarbons can be retained in coastal sediments for months or even years after this spill. Shrimp and blue crab are directly influenced by coastal marshes, which are being infiltrated by enormous amounts of drifting oil. It doesn't seem like there are many marine or coastal animals that remain to be unaffected by this disaster. The seafood industry will never be the same in that area, as well as the fact that the environment will take a long time to recover. When oil starts mixing in the water, it can change composition and becomes what's known as mousse. This is a sticky substance that clings to whatever it comes in contact with. Many marine animals don't know how to avoid a slick, and some fish are even attracted to it, as it can resemble food. This, however, can result in the fish's death because taking in oil is very toxic. One of the reasons why so much oil may have sunk to the bottom was because it was broken up into teeny droplets by chemical dispersants, making the oil so small that it wasn't even buoyant enough to rise, or otherwise it was expected to sink. Also, as oil still in the water column ages, it becomes more tar-like in a process called weathering. And as it becomes more like tar, it is more likely to sink. This means that this tar-like substance will be on the bottom of the ocean for centuries. Now to the estimates. According to most estimates, the spill killed 250,000 seabirds, 2,800 sea otters, 300 harbor seals, 250 bald eagles, and up to 30 killer whales. Also, one of the most devastating was 300 billion salmon eggs. So those were the initial effects on the environment. Now let's talk about the long-term effects. You probably all know about the Exxon Valdez disaster, and here are some facts. This was 21 years ago, this spill, and there are still 21,000 gallons of oil just below the surface of Alaska's Prince William Sound, and the long-term environmental effects on the area have far exceeded scientists' original predictions. Because similar cleanup methods were used in both oil spills, the BP oil spill and the Exxon Valdez spill, it is estimated that even more oil than the Exxon Valdez could stay on the surface of the Gulf. Only 7 months away from the spill, it is still hard to estimate the long-term effect. However, recent research on the long-term effects of the ExxonMobil spill found that the harlequin ducks, which are particularly susceptible of the pollution, are still exposed to residential oil spills after the spill occurred. Harlequin ducks feed on invertebrates like insects, crustaceans, and mollusks. If they are still impacted, it is likely that another vulnerable species are as well. There is the same outcome prediction for many of the birds in the Gulf. The Gulf marshlands are a breeding area for many animals. Young shrimp, for example, mature in the marshlands, and even when they migrate to the ocean to become food for fish. In 3 or 4 years, if there are no adult shrimp to migrate out, the entire food chain would be affected. Scientists also say that the hydrocarbons and heavy metals from the oil will move from the mollusk throughout the food chain. Hydrocarbons, which can be carcinogenic, will eventually break down, but no one knows how long the heavy metals will remain in the marine food chain. Hydrocarbons will kill many animals in the food chain for years to come. This oil is not just harming the animals living in the Gulf, but also humans. A study of a 2002 spill off the coast of Spain showed that scientists documented DNA damage among volunteers doing cleanup along the beach. Because a lot of manual cleanup was used in the Gulf, many people predict that this will be similar to the outcome. This crude oil is full of toxic materials, and when oil from a leaking underwater well hits the surface, many of these materials will enter the air near where cleanup workers are breathing. This will affect generations to come.